Welcome to the Gospel Liberty Podcast. Thanks for joining me for another episode. We are facing difficult times right now in the United States of America and around the world, and I want to take this episode and give some perspective and some encouragement for difficult times. Proverbs 21:1 says, "The king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he will." Do you believe that? Not just would you say you believe it, but do you actually believe it? The king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he will. Everything that goes on with civil governments and civil government officials is of the Lord's doing. He turns kings' hearts wherever he will. And by implication, of course, and other texts would obviously confirm this, he turns presidents' hearts. He turns senators' hearts, Supreme Court justices' hearts, and individual people's hearts wherever he will. Revelation 1:5 says that Jesus Christ is the faithful witness, the firstborn of the dead, and the ruler of kings on earth. Jesus Christ is the ruler of kings on earth. A couple things came together to make me want to talk about this topic in this episode here. I just finished Doug Wilson's excellent biography of John Knox. My wife and I are going through the Proverbs, and I was just meditating on Proverbs 21:1 earlier. I'm also reading Nick Needham's excellent church history work, 2,000 Years of Christ's Power, incredible work there. I saw an interesting note online giving perspective of the times, which I'll mention here in a second. And also the Supreme Court leak occurred regarding Roe versus Wade. And that's not to mention all of the other extreme events that are occurring right now that I'm not going to get into, but I'm sure of which you are aware in many ways. We all know that these are wild, wild times in the world and in the United States of America. But this is where it's helpful to know your Bible and to know history. So often we have a very narrow view of what's going on in our lifetimes, and we can tend to over-exaggerate our own challenges when compared to other challenges in the past. And because of that, we can easily write off biblical texts that the Lord wants to use to encourage us, or write off how the Lord has brought amazing restoration from ruin in past generations. So with that said, let me read this poem or this article that I came across called "Imagine You Were Born in 1900. Now, I don't endorse the whole thing, so I'm going to skip over a couple parts. But stay with me here because I think the Lord's going to use it to encourage you. And this is why, once again, it's so important to know church history and why something like Nick Needham's 2,000 Years of Christ's Power can be so encouraging in times like these. So let me get into this here. Imagine you were born in 1900. I'll link this in the description. It's a mess out there now. Hard to discern between what's a real threat and what is just simple panic and hysteria. For a small amount of perspective at this moment, imagine you were born in 1900. On your 14th birthday, World War I starts and ends on your 18th birthday. 22 million people perish in that war. Later in the year, a Spanish flu epidemic hits the planet and runs until your 20th birthday. 50 million people die from it in those 2 years. Yes, 50 million. On your 29th birthday, the Great Depression begins. Unemployment hits 25%. The world GDP drops 27%. That runs until you are 33. The country nearly collapses along with the world economy. When you turn 39, World War II starts. You aren't even over the hill yet. And don't try to catch your breath. On your 41st birthday, the United States is fully pulled into World War II. Between your 39th and 45th birthday, 75 million people perish in the war. Smallpox was an epidemic until you were in your 40s, as it killed 300 million people during your lifetime. At 50, the Korean War starts. 5 million perish. From your birth until you were 55, you dealt with the fear of polio epidemics each summer. You experience friends and family contracting polio and being paralyzed and or dying. At 55, the Vietnam War begins and doesn't end for 20 years. 40 million people perish in that conflict. During the Cold War, you lived each day with the fear of nuclear annihilation. On your 62nd birthday, you have the Cuban Missile Crisis, a tipping point in the Cold War. When you turn 75, the Vietnam War finally ends. A person born in the 1980s or 1990s hardly knows how difficult life used to be, nor has ever survived some war or natural disaster. A young man born in 1995 and now turning 26 or 27 feels bad when his Amazon order takes more than 3 days to arrive, or if it has less than 100 likes on his Facebook or Instagram page. Perspective is an amazing art. Let's try and keep things in perspective. In our current year, many of us live in comfort, convenience, access to a variety of entertainment sources at home, and often more than we need. But people always complain about everything. We have electricity, internet, telephone, food, clean water, and a roof. Humanity has survived more severe circumstances. That is excellent perspective. Now, the author there says humanity has survived more severe circumstances than what we are experiencing now, and he's right, but he has the wrong emphasis, of course. The emphasis should be on the Lord governed all things, including extreme difficulty in past generations and in our current generation, slowly but surely spreading the gospel and advancing his kingdom, glorifying Christ through it all, preserving his people even through tribulation, distress, persecution, famine, nakedness, danger, and sword, to quote Romans 8. Yet in all those things, including death, because to die is gain, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. And what I want to point out here is how quickly tides turn, even in kingdoms or countries that seem invincible or eternal or extremely stable. Think of Rome in the 1st century BC. The Roman Republic is in turmoil. Civil wars all over the place. What's going to happen? Julius Caesar rises to power and becomes dictator of a Roman Empire. The Roman Republic lasted almost 500 years, and then just like that, there's turmoil and things change. And this isn't just some boring history lesson. Think about it. People actually lived through that. The most powerful country on earth went from a republic to a dictatorship. And then you know the story about Caesar's assassination and the struggle that ensued afterwards, followed by the rise of Octavian or Augustus Caesar, who was emperor at Jesus' birth. And who was working through all this? The Lord, who turns kings' hearts. And as Daniel says in Daniel 2:20-21, "Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings." And this isn't just Rome. This changing of tides and turmoil has occurred literally everywhere in various degrees of regularity. Think of what King Jesus was doing in England and Scotland, for example, after the Protestant Reformation in 1517. Think of everything that these people went through with the political turmoil. You have the famous Henry VIII, who marries Catherine of Aragon and then seeks an annulment because they can't have children, and then disagrees with the Pope and sets up the Church of England separate from Roman Catholicism. Okay, now this is not a small thing. It's hard to even describe how big of a life change this would have caused for the people in England, real people. Then for almost 150 years, until 1689 and Mary II, you have turmoil and kings and queens going back and forth between being friendly to Protestants and persecuting them, allowing various levels of freedoms, sometimes within the same generation, changing drastically. Imagine these swings that would occur even during the lifetime of one person. And in 1649, even the king is assassinated. And in 1653, Oliver Cromwell, he becomes Lord Protector in England without a king or queen in a period known as the Interregnum. There were actual Christians and people living there at this time. Now, I pray this becomes personal to you and to me, and not just boring history. Think of what these people were going through, and how quickly these things were turning one way or another, and how King Jesus was working behind the scenes the entire time to glorify himself. At times there would look to be ruin, but then he would bring restoration. But then there would be great challenge, and then more restoration. And the ruler of kings, Jesus, is sitting on his throne the whole time. He's advancing his kingdom through the preaching of the gospel and individuals getting saved and living for his glory in all of life. Or think of other events like the French Revolution in 1789, followed by a dictatorship shortly after of Napoleon. This was in France. Or the events of World War I and what followed afterward with the economic turmoil around the world, and especially in Germany, and the rise of the far left and wicked Nazi party, or the fall of communism in the late 1980s. Or think about how quickly things changed generationally, even in Israel, with the people repenting and then turning away from the Lord, and kings repenting and kings turning away from the Lord. The challenges that are going on now are nothing new. This is how the Lord works to glorify Christ. He sets up kingdoms in this earth, and he tears them down. He moves the tides of economics, of education, of freedom movements, or giving people up to sin and communistic big civil government movements. King Jesus is not surprised, and he does not promise that we will live in peaceful, stable times. Although that is indeed what we should be praying for, per 1 Timothy 2, we should pray for kings and civil government officials that we may live a peaceful and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way, it says. So do not fall into despair when you see extreme challenges going on in the world. As quickly as things go bad, the Lord can turn it right back around. Christ is a king who loves to bring restoration from ruin. As he says in Proverbs 14:34, he says, "Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people." Or as Psalm 33:12 says, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord." So continue to look to Christ in your personal life. All true revivals of cultures and countries to the glory of God and all gospel liberty movements start in the hearts of individuals. Am I preaching the gospel to myself daily? Am I seeing my own sin, trusting in Christ afresh daily, rejoicing in his grace, seeing the glory of Christ in his life, death, and resurrection, not shifting from the hope of the gospel in my personal life? This is how we are all strengthened. Am I repenting of sin? Do I truly hate sin? And am I seeking to kill all of it in my mind, heart, and actions? Do I care about the mission of God, or do I care more about the American dream? Am I loving my wife or my husband and my children? Am I leading in family worship, not out of duty only, but out of delight? Am I bringing my children up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord, educating them in the Christian worldview, and not pretending like there are school subjects that don't have anything to do with Christ and his lordship, since his lordship covers all things? Am I seeking to serve the people of my church, not just as a social club, but am I exhorting them every day, as Hebrews 3 says, that no one may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin? Am I a part of a church that is devoted to the apostles' teaching, the Bible, and devoted to prayer, and devoted to fellowship, like Acts 2 says, and devoted to the Great Commission? Am I living on mission? Do I care about the gospel spreading to my neighbors and to unreached peoples? Or is my mission more about how I can build the best classic car, conquer the latest video game, become the best at a certain sport? Not that those things are necessarily bad in and of themselves, but am I living for what is bigger, spreading the glory of Christ in all areas of life to all people, speaking the gospel to people? Am I working my vocation to the glory of Christ? Or do I just see my job as just some way to make a paycheck, just to earn a living so I can have a nice, relaxing Saturday and Sunday, have enough money in the bank to go on nice vacations? Or am I working my vocation to the glory of Christ, spreading his glory in the cultural mandate, filling the earth and subduing it? Am I seeking to show others how the gospel impacts all things, including politics, economics, music, education, sports, etc.? Am I fighting for just laws to be implemented in society, laws that are consistent with the general equity of the civil law of God and His Word? Or do I just come up with my own thoughts about what's best for society? The Lord is the one who controls the ebb and flow of history. Do you believe that? Do I believe that? He controls the tides that change cultures for better and for worse. He's slowly but surely advancing His kingdom in His timing, turning the hearts of kings, of civil government officials, and all individuals wherever He wills. So trust Him. Do not lose heart. Keep looking to His grace. Keep seeking to be faithful in your garden, in your area that the Lord has entrusted you with. And He will be victorious to save many and to change cultures for His glory, maybe in the short term in your state, in your country, but definitely in the long term throughout the whole world. Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Gospel Liberty Podcast.